All right, good afternoon, guys. Thank you for being here, and joining us today are Major General Derek Rydholm, Deputy to the Chief of Air Force Reserve, and Brigadier General Diana Holland, Commander, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, South Atlantic Division. They're going to talk to you today about hurricane relief efforts and what their services have done in support of it. General Rydholm,
thanks,
please.
Hey, first off, I appreciate having the opportunity to stand here and hopefully be able to answer the questions that you would have about what we're doing in support of the hurricanes and any of the other kind of natural disasters we've had. And I'm standing in on behalf of my boss, Lieutenant General Marianne Miller, that couldn't make it here today. But we're here to represent the more than 69,000 reserve citizen airmen that are currently serving in the United States Air Force Reserve. Over the last couple of weeks, we've seen numerous natural disasters, and I would tell you that I have firsthand knowledge in that. I have a house in Key Largo, Florida, and for Hurricane Irma, I was actually in Miami when it struck. I evacuated out of the Keys, but it's humbling to see the amount of luck that I had and the minimal damage that I had. But our hearts go out to everybody that's been impacted by the multitude of different events that we've had. And large swaths in the states, partners in Mexico, the Caribbean, the islands, just a lot of stuff. And additionally, even reaching out to the West Coast, to the California wildfires and other things. We have three special units in the Reserve Command that do the hurricane hunting mission, the aerial spray mission, which has been active during these events, and the wildfire missions as well. So we're quite proud of what they've done in support of the efforts. And we anticipate here, with all the 4 Atlantic hurricanes we've seen and just the instability that we've seen lately, that we're here prepared to do as much as we can and continue to work that and to support everyone that's been affected by this. So well before Harvey made landfall, until the season is over and the wildfire season is over, we'll be there. And we'll be, through volunteerism and other forces, here to support as a supporting agency in the Department of Defense to all the rest of our partner agencies in this time of difficult time. So over to General Holland.
Thank you, sir. Well, good afternoon, and I too thank you for being here today. As is already mentioned, I'm Diana Holland, and I represent the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Over the past few weeks, the Corps of Engineers has been heavily engaged in supporting our states and territories following 3 hurricanes, Harvey, Irma, and Maria. And so, like the General here, I'd like to express our thoughts and prayers for those affected by these storms. We recognize that there are people who have lost a home, their belongings, potentially their livelihood, and it's for that reason the people of our organization, the organization I represent, feel so passionate about doing everything possible to help. So just a little bit about who we are. I command one of 9 divisions of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the South Atlantic Division. The area of responsibility of our division includes the southeastern United States as well as the Caribbean islands. So, as you can imagine, the entire impact of Irma and Maria was felt in our region. And so our division is the lead for the Corps of Engineers in the hurricane response following Irma and Maria. The areas in our region affected include Georgia, Florida, the Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico. And just to briefly describe the complexity of this, 2 storms, which each brought unique impacts requiring specific resources and expertise, 2 states, 2 territories, 4 governors, 2 FEMA regions, and so on. It has been truly remarkable to watch the broad U.S. government response, and I'm happy to report that we're working very closely together in support of those governors' priorities. So as I mentioned, each state and territory has its own requirements, but there are some things that remain consistent. We share the desire to reunite families, get survivors out of shelters and hotels, and get back to their homes and restore some normalcy. So our role in this is, as we like to say, FEMA's engineers. They give us our missions, and our missions are what you might expect engineers to do. Debris removal, and when I talk about debris removal, I mean high volume, in the hundreds of thousands of cubic yards. Infrastructure assessments temporary emergency power restoration, temporary roofing. Some of you may be familiar with Blue Roof, and I can talk more about that later, but that's one of the primary things we do when residences are damaged, and temporary housing. And then in collaboration with the United States Coast Guard and NOAA, we work really hard with the ports authorities to help them open the ports. So our approach to this support to FEMA is right people, right place, early. And here's what I mean by that. Early on, before Irma, we pre-positioned our soldiers and civilians, selected because they have certain specific skill sets, on the island so that as soon as Hurricane Irma passed, they could quickly assess the damage and begin to plan for the required support. We anticipated that ports of entry would be closed, and they were. Had we not been on those islands in advance, along with the other agencies, we would not have been timely. We would have been subject to the same delays that others faced because the airports and the ports were closed. Same approach for Florida. Although in the case of Florida, we don't face the same logistics challenges as we do on the islands, because the ability to transport people and supplies by ground is a key advantage. Then similarly, as Maria approached, we had the right people in place so that after the storm, they could quickly restart our efforts. Right people, right place, early. Last week I had the privilege to visit Florida, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, and unfortunately, as you've seen in all of the images, a lot of damage across the board. And that was before Maria struck the territories. Our teams, which sheltered there during the hurricanes, were able to begin their assessments of the damage yesterday morning following the storm. And the assessments continue. The airports are damaged and closed, although I've just learned that the airport in Puerto Rico has opened to military traffic. The ports are closed. Of course, a lot of power outages, roads blocked by debris, water damage, the things you would expect following a major hurricane. These assessments will continue over the next several days, but all of us that support FEMA's response are acting. And so here's what some of those actions are. We're looking at our ports on Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands and are working with NOAA and the Coast Guard to survey the channels so that we can confirm that they are safe to open. We will assist FEMA and the islands in emergency repairs at the airports in San Juan and Virgin Islands. Power. So with power, other things are manageable. So it's really one of our first priority. We're helping to assess power on both Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, particularly in the hospitals, health clinics, and wastewater treatment plants. We've restarted the Blue Roof program in the Virgin Islands. So Blue Roof refers to FEMA's 10-millimeter blue sheeting that can be installed over a damaged roof, providing protection from additional rain and allowing people to leave shelters and return home. In fact, we think tomorrow that the first blue roof in the Virgin Islands will happen, and that will be a huge milestone and a real morale boost for the people of the Virgin Islands. And as we look to the weeks and months ahead, we will continuously right-size the response teams to ensure we have the right capabilities in place, that we're balanced across all of these regions with the right leaders at the right time as the recovery continues. So in closing, we're just over halfway through the hurricane season. And that's important for us to remember. 1 November is kind of the mark on the wall where we see the end of that season. So though we focus our attention on the response to Irma and Maria, we also must remain prepared and flexible in the event we have another storm. I'd like to talk briefly about our people. So our essential soldiers and civilians of the Corps of Engineers who were on Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands following Irma chose to remain in place despite warnings that Maria could be a major hurricane and despite being offered the opportunity to evacuate. They wanted to be in position to help as soon as possible, and they wanted to show the people of those two territories that we're in this together. It has really been an inspiration to be a part of this effort. So one point of nuance. Many of the hundreds of the Corps of Engineers who are part of this response aren't actually assigned to the division I command. They come from across the United States, including Hawaii, Alaska, Seattle, Tulsa, Sacramento, Buffalo, New York, and many other places. Without exception, when I've asked our team, how do they feel about the mission, serving in Georgia, Florida, Puerto Rico, or the Virgin Islands, they say, I can't imagine being anywhere else. I want to help. I want to make this right for people who have lost so much. So in closing, there's a long road ahead, but as a representative of the Army Corps of Engineers, I can say we're committed to this no matter how long it's required. Thank you for your attention and your patience, and I guess we're happy to answer your questions.
Absolutely.
Idris.
Sure. You sort of mentioned this in your remarks, but other than the electrical grid, could you talk about how widespread the sort of devastation is in regards to schools and hospitals, and how long do you think it's going to take you to complete your assessment on the damage?
I think it's going to be many days before we have a good picture on on the whole scope of this. The first thing we start with is the essential services. So, like I said, the hospitals, the clinics, some of the government buildings, because they need that in order to continue to manage the response. So I can't say exactly how long it's going to take, but it's going to be weeks before we know the full scope. But that doesn't mean that we don't start for a few weeks. But the major assessment and the overall complete restoration on Puerto Rico will take some time.
What about the schools and hospitals? Sort of where does the other infrastructure other than the electrical grid sort of stand right now?
So I don't know right now beyond power. I mean, we do know that the power outages is extensive, between 95 and 100% right now. So it will, you know, and without power, then you potentially have issues with water. But all of that is still being assessed right now.
Lucas?
You mentioned, ma'am, an airport in Puerto Rico is now open to military traffic. Which airport was that?
San Juan, the major airport.
Can either of you outline the military assistance to the Virgin Islands right now?
I can speak to some degree to that. We have had air mobility aircraft that have gone down through the Air National Guard. We've taken special tactics teams, and members of those teams are the types of people that would open airports. That's some of the stuff that they can do. We've also provided humanitarian aid through mobility aircraft with MREs and water and other things, and that's ongoing through Air Mobility Command and U.S. Transportation Command.